Joining me now, Walter Jones. Speaking of sports, you probably didn't know this about Walter Jones. He was a star shooting guard for Hargrave Military Academy back in the day. They've got pictures of him when I was there all over the place. They called him the Golden Arm. This is before they had three-pointers. Walter Jones was deadly. He was their shooting guard. He still holds records in that school. Now he doesn't play basketball so much. He's got other things going on. Good to have you, Congressman Walter Jones, with us today.
John, thank you. The story of my basketball prowess gets better every time I'm on your show. So thank you.
It's true. I mean, you had your own name. They call him the Golden Arm. This is back before. If they had a three line back when you played, you would have held records that would have never gotten broken. They say you were deadly back in the day.
Those days are behind us, but they're good memories. So thank you for bringing me back with some good memories. Thank you.
Okay, in the House of Representatives, I know we got a lot to talk about today. Let's get to the budget. Let's get to the budget resolution. Is this thing going to pass? I mean, is it going to get to the Senate? What is going on here?
John, this is why the American people are not so encouraged by Congress. Here we go again. This will be a budget that they say will balance in 5 or 10 years, it will never balance. That's just part of the game, whether it be the Republicans in this situation or the Democrats. But they have to pass the budget if they're going to get to the tax bill. So they will have it on the floor about 10:30, 11, I guess, and it will pass. But it'll be a fairly close vote. I'm not going to vote for it. Probably, I would say maybe 20 Republicans will vote no. And it's just simply because as I told Diane Black, I really like Diane Black. She's the chairman. But you keep putting more money in there for Afghanistan. And you know my feelings, John. I know your feelings. We've talked about it many times about the waste of life and money in Afghanistan. So it's part of the process, and, you know, it will move forward.
All right, so you're voting no, but you think Diane and the leadership thinks they have the votes to get it to the Senate, where then they need 50 votes in order to pass it, and then we'll get the tax reform. But you never know what happens when it gets to the Senate, what McConnell's going to do. Now, there's another bill I want to get your take on in Chairman McCall's committee, the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection Act. And part of this is they're asking for $10 billion for a border wall. Congressman, that's the Border Security of America Act by Michael McCall in Texas that passed out of his committee 18-12. Now it's going to the House floor for debate. You know the Democrats and some of your colleagues are going to try to tie it to amnesty. Where do you think, sir, this is going to shake out?
Well, I think it will be on the floor, and you're right. They would offer amendments dealing with the DACA issue, but all in all, I think the bill would be voted on without amendments. I know there will probably be several. I don't know what the rules for debate are going to be yet, but I would imagine they're going to have a few amendments from Democrats and possibly Republicans, and then the bill will be voted on. I haven't had a chance to read the bill. I will read it before we vote because I'm very concerned. Again, John, I've said this on your show, the deficit and debt are just beginning to balloon again. And we can't, with all the tragedy, not only of the shooting, but the hurricanes and all the money we got to come up to help Texas and Louisiana and Florida and now Puerto Rico. I don't know where the money's coming from. I really don't. I want to make sure that whether it's the wall or not the wall, we know what we're doing, and we know where the money's coming from. Mm-hmm. We keep putting the money out there, and it's coming from the next generation. Your son, the baseball player, God, he's going to have a heck of a tax bill when it comes.
So let's talk about the Trump tax plan that I'm sure you've seen snippets of it. It's now getting work done, we understand, in the committees. The president giving Congress a deadline, the Republicans a deadline to pass this of Christmas to get it out of the House, where it'll die in the Senate anyway. But that's the plan. From the things you've seen with it, what was your initial take? Are you inclined to be for it, against it? Why or why not?
Well, John, let me say that the Ways and Means Committee is doing a very good thing. We had a 1-hour session yesterday with at least 7 experts. 4 of the 7 were professors. 2 of the 7 that led the discussion about business taxes changes were, one was in the Bush administration as an economic advisor, Bush Sr. and then Bush Jr. I thought it was one of the better discussions, but we don't have the details. They're working on the details as we talk, and the details yet until they get to the committee to mark up the bill, which I think will probably be, we go in the next 3 weeks. Right now, we've had 2 listening sessions with experts on the issue of taxes and tax changes and reform to come in and talk, and I think that's been very beneficial, but we've not had details. And until you have the details, and that's for the American people as well as Congress, you cannot really decide on the future where the tax breaks for businesses, really get the economy moving again. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And so what I'm doing is what many members have told me they're doing. We're just trying to walk with this issue and look carefully at what's being proposed. And right now, I'll be repetitive, John, we have not seen the details. We've seen the summaries, but not the details.
You're going to wait till you see the detail in order to make a decision on it. So you want to actually read the bill before it's passed, unlike the infamous quotation by former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Read it, don't read it, and then pass it, and then we can see what's in it. One of the most ridiculous statements for a member of that position ever made in history of the Republic. So ridiculous. So,
John, I want people like you to be able you've got an audience across this nation, and many people like yourself have audiences. We need to have a debate and a discussion by people who understand this tax bill, and then have the debate. Like, we made a mistake of rushing through the health care bill, and I don't think they are on this tax bill. I think it's going to be fully vetted, and it needs to be, because this is talking about the future, economic future of America.
We need to have the debate, and, you know, my concern with these always is that whatever it starts out, it keeps getting watered down, and then you end up with garbage, and then the lobbyists get involved. And I think one of the things that the president is determined to, I mean, he's got 2 things that he really wants to do, and they're pretty simple. The first thing is he wants to simplify the process, get rid of all the loopholes that the top 1% of wage earners in this country take advantage of that average people just can't do. I mean, the majority of your constituents and my listeners, they don't have, you know, $30,000 to pay a tax lawyer to go through every page of that 8,000-page document and trying to find out how they can pay no taxes. I mean, they have to pay whatever it is. He's determined to do that. And he's also determined to get rid of the state income tax deduction. And, Congressman, why the president wants to do that is he feels that the federal government is subsidizing high income tax states because it's basically a transfer of wealth. So you're in a high tax state, you're paying a high income taxes, but then you can write them off your federal returns. So his point is the representatives in those high tax states have limited accountability back to their constituents for their taxes because they're getting written off anyway. And it's like, let's leave it up to the people. If they want to pay a 9% income tax in New York and keep voting those people in, have at it. But the feds aren't going to subsidize that. I really think he's onto something. That's going to be the battle, and we'll see what plays out. But that's the concept.
John, you mentioned one issue. I promise you that just in the 2 listening sessions I went to, for every one issue, there are 5 more issues. And they're all interrelated. So that's the reason that I think most of my colleagues, I'm not speaking for any of them, but myself, want to be very careful and make sure we have an understanding of what we are proposing in these changes, and will it be in the best interest of the people or not. So that's why I think, again, people like yourself who've got such a vast listening audience need to get some of these members of Congress from Ways and Means on the show and let them answer questions. Because to me, the American people want tax relief and tax reform, but they need to know what we're getting.
Absolutely, no question. And you hit the nail on the head. Here's one thing, though, Congressman. We know there's going to be no change, much to our chagrin. No debate on Afghanistan. Now, remember when Barbara Lee got her amendment through appropriations and we were all excited? Remember that? Then Paul Ryan deep-sixed it at midnight in rules. The Senate, same thing happened, right? No debate. That's gone. It gets kicked out. And what they say is, what leadership in both houses say, is that, well, that was not the appropriate venue, right? Appropriations, it shouldn't be there. In the Senate, they're like, foreign relations, it shouldn't be there. Armed services, it should be there. It should be somewhere else. Well, where should it be? I mean, here we are going in, we're going to pass all these things, as you said, all this money for Afghanistan in the budget resolution. We still haven't had a debate. No AUMF, no declaration of war, no conversation. It's just done. And so where was the Paul Ryan promise of he's going to have the debate under the proper environment, the proper purview? We get nothing.
Well, I actually had a phone call with the former Commandant Chuck Krulak yesterday, as a matter of fact. I don't know if you've seen this Netflix movie, but I did mention the last time I was on your show, War Machine.
Yes.
It's a satire starring Brad Pitt. I had met with the producer a couple weeks ago. He happened to be in D.C., didn't come see me, but he found time to meet with me. We're trying to get it's the reason I called General Krulak. We're trying to get sometime in November, if we can put it together. We want to have a rally, so to speak, with members of Congress, both parties, and also veteran groups, and also this, the producer said he would try to help us with it. We've got a long ways from putting it together, but we're trying now, because your frustration and mine, there's no reason for it. As I've said on your show many times, Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, could right now pick up the phone and call the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and say, mark up an AUMF next week. That's all it takes. It doesn't take anything else. It takes the leader of the House, who's Paul Ryan. He has a responsibility to the Constitution and to members of Congress. And you talked about Mr. Taylor at one time. I mean, the whole thing is that there is no reason that we are not having a debate. No reason.
Well, we never have the debate. And, Congressman, you and I and some others, we're fighting a very lonely battle because it goes on. It never gets anywhere. And, when Trump won and he campaigned on getting out of these wars, that was a key piece of his platform. It just went by the wayside. Yep. And, he threw this Afghanistan thing out. And, he threw it out, walked it back. That's kind of what the president does. He'll throw something out, see how the base reacts, right? So he threw out amnesty and DACA. What happened? Everybody went berserk, right? Now he walked it back immediately. Well, that's not a good idea. He threw out Afghanistan. There was a couple people complaining like me. Maybe there's 5,000 troops. Then he said he's thinking about it, walks it back. But other than John Fredericks, Walter Jones, and a handful of other people, when he authorized another 5,000 troops to Afghanistan and walked away from AUMF, there was no outrage. It's like there's nothing. Other than me and yourself and a handful of others, there's crickets. It's like nobody cares. And it's like we're just so accustomed to this war now, it's like, yeah, whatever.
Well, John, I know you watched some, if not all, of the Vietnam series on PBS by
great.
Ken Burns and Lynn Novak.
Excellent.
If anybody watched that carefully, they could see the parallel between the politics of Vietnam and now the politics of Afghanistan. Very clear, very clear. And that's what angers me. Obviously, we haven't lost 55,000 Americans in Afghanistan at this point, but they will continue to die. It'll just be at lower numbers. I'm going to continue to raise Cain about it. I know that some of the Virginia delegation feels the way we feel, and we're going to continue to push. But you're right. It's going to take the American people. The American people have got to call their member of Congress and say, look, You can debate budgets, you can debate tax changes, but for God's sakes, meet your constitutional responsibility and debate war.
Well, that's what they have to do. They've not done it. There's not the sense of outrage. I mean, when I bring the topic up, even with my audience, you know, their eyes glaze over and they're onto something else.
It's right. I understand. It's sad. I'm laughing because it's sad. It's sad.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. And what's happened with this, Congressman Jones, what's happened with this war in Afghanistan, it's become like part of what we do.
Yep.
And so even when we get casualties, like at the beginning, you know, they'd be scrolled on the bottom of the screen and everybody wanted to know what happened. Now it's just, oh, we had 2 more of our servicemen died Monday in Afghanistan. Okay, you know, it gets 3 seconds mentioned and everybody's on to something else. And it's almost like we've just come to accept this perpetual war, which is, I mean, we've never done this in the history of the United States. This has turned into a perpetual war that we're in. And we've never done this. I mean, I grew up in the Vietnam era. We're not that far in age. I mean, I grew up seeing the protest in the colleges and living it. This thing has turned into a perpetual war that now average people have just accepted. And I think that's very dangerous.
Well, I think at some point in time, I know I mentioned this on your show, I've talked to Bruce Fine, constitutional lawyer, and there's got to be some way that a member of Congress, no matter who he or she might be, who feels they've been denied their most sacred duty of debating sending a young man or woman to die in war, ought to have some legal recourse against one man, in this case the Speaker of the House, who is stopping a debate. I've looked into this thing. I'm not a lawyer, you know that. But there's just something wrong that I or any of my colleagues can be blocked from meeting our constitutional duty. It just should be illegal.
Absolutely illegal. No question. We're out of time for this segment. It's very frustrating for Congressman Jones and I. We seem to be, and a handful of others, very lonely voices out there. This perpetual, now ongoing war to nowhere in Afghanistan, which has just turned into a money machine for the neocons. It's unbelievable. It's sick. Yep. We can't even have a debate on it, and there's no outrage. The thing that I'm concerned about is the lack of outrage, especially by Trump's base. It's just not there. It's just not there.
Well, we're going to keep beating the drum, John. Somebody's going to hear us before it's over.
You know what? God put everybody on this earth for a reason. Maybe this is ours. I don't know.
Amen.
Congressman, thanks for being with us. You're the best. Appreciate your candor, as always, sir.